Take the piece, the lid, and then trim and assemble the pieces. Bigger piece of clay, sometimes you have to open it up a little more slowly and a little more carefully. I'm using both hands in here to pull it out. Use this back of the hand to keep it from going off center. At some point when you get to the bottom, you'll want to check the thickness, allow for some trimming. You can use anything you want to. I just use a little paring knife. So it's still a little bit thick on the bottom. Go down just a little bit more. If I go down too far, I won't have a bottom. So I'd rather trim a little bit more than take too much out. So there we are, opened up. Smooth the bottom a little bit. And on the sides, it actually goes under quite a bit, so you want to push that in and up a little bit at a time.
Here at the kennel, we set out to make sure your day starts off.
Some people would do this in just 2 or 3 pulls. Not necessarily trying for speed, but we want consistent thickness on the side walls. So now that I've straightened that outside wall up, I'm going to come up one time, taking the excess clay out, which is a little bit wet on the outside. So I'll come all the way up to the top. The very rim, usually you want to go in just a little bit and don't thin it anywhere near the finished thickness at this point. But if you have any excess clay, unevenness in the walls, that'll start showing at the top. So I'll see if I can get that all at once this next pull. So I'm putting equal pressure inside and out, a little bit more pressure on the inside, on the outside as I come to the top, to make sure we don't flare the cylinder in the early stages. Now, if you notice, I'm going back down. Sometimes that helps. There's a little bit of unevenness at the bottom. We can trim that off too. Some people would use a wooden rib at this point to compress the clay. A lot of times I skip that step if I feel like it doesn't need it. Now, if you notice, the top is really at the point before I shape it. I'm going to leave it about that thickness. I'll do about maybe 2 more pulls. I'm going to get under that bottom and straighten it up. I want to keep it pretty wet, pretty slippery. Very top, it's a little uneven. I'll trim that in the later stages. 1 more pull. Now I'm going to press out a little bit on the inside. Push it out and then hold it with the outside hand to thin it. See, it's a bit smoother now. You see the clay coming to the top. I'm going to ease off on the pressure a little bit, keeping that top going in a little bit. I'm going to trim it one more time. And since I've stopped on the pulls right now, I'm going to go into the bottom of the jar with the sponge just to clean it up, make it dry and fairly smooth. So I'm just going to start bringing it out because I want a sort of a graceful, narrow base, looking, thinking almost of like an apple shape here. The only ginger jar, that's what you're starting to see right there. So now I'm going to push it in because this is where the lid will rest, right here at the top. Okay, we found the metal rib. This is going to compress the clay and smooth the lines. In this case, I don't want throw lines. If I wanted throw lines, I would instead of leaving it right there as it is. This also helps when you're shaping the piece to compress the clay, smooth it, and controls the shape. Now here's the point where if I want to flare at the top, I'm going to push out a little bit more, as I said, maybe like almost like a suggestive of the apple shape. If I want a cookie jar, I want to make sure I can plenty of room for my hand in there when it shrinks. So now I'm going to shape the rim, and this is where the lid will rest. Make it nice and smooth. And I'm going to thin it just a little bit right here, just to give it a little more graceful shape. Anywhere along here you could put grooves or marks just to define the shape of the piece, but as I said, I want this to be smooth like the outside of an apple. So I'm going to come back, just push it out a little bit right here. Let the base go down, and then I'm going to trim a little bit to undercut that. I have a special tool I use which helps get underneath the base and kind of removes that clay. And now we're going to throw the lid for the covered jar. Take a caliper measurement. Whether you want a flat or a domed lid, I'm try to dome this a little bit so it's going to be thin in the middle and come up like a shallow bowl. I won't be trimming the inside, I'll be trimming the outside, so I want the inside to be the shape I want in a finished piece. So now we'll look to check the calipers. This is the part that fits inside the jar, so you can see I'm pretty far outside of that right now. So I'm going to separate the lip from the rim. And you see right there your finished shape. And we have some unevenness in the clay here, so we're going to have to work on that too. So I needed a smaller piece of clay probably in reality. That looks just about right. This lid is going to shrink less than the jar because it's a lower, flatter shape. So I'm going to keep it on the inside, and if I need to trim it in to fit the jar after it's dry or when it's leather hard, I will do that. So I got to get rid of all this stuff out here. I don't want. Use a tool just to define that groove a little bit.